Oh, it is a good morning this morning. We have good things continuing to happen here at Hampton. We have family placing membership. Wendy Reed and her children. Wendy's sitting right over here. Has two of her children here, Dustin and Gabby here, and then AJ sitting over here with the teenage boys. And they've been attending here for some time and wish to officially place membership this morning, and you be sure to meet them and greet them as you have already with some, but their name and address will appear in the bulletin for this coming up next week. And so we're glad to have you here. We go way back with Wendy and our family. When I turned 16, her grandfather sold insurance, and Mom and Daddy sent me up there to buy insurance from her grandfather. And so we've known the Lavelle family for a long time, and Wendy sings, and we sang at weddings and funerals for years and years together. And so we have a long history there with the Reed family and your aunts and the family there with the Lavelle family. But it is good. We have another announcement that Lynn and Peggy Dillon are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. We make mention of that whenever we have someone that has 50 years or such, and that is quite an accomplishment, and it is one that we celebrate and encourage others, because you are examples to these who are younger. Can you imagine being married to the same person 50 years? It happens, and it happens real regularly, and we celebrate that. And I see Matt and Christy here, their children. Christy, I was thinking about when Jana was born, that Peggy, you brought food over, and Christy came with you, and we had a picture of Christy holding Jana sitting on our couch. And I wish I could find that and see that, but you know, I don't want to make you feel old, but Jana is 32 years old now, but she was a teenager there holding Jana, but it was a sweet picture there, and that's precious memories there. But congratulations, 50 years. It's not today, it's coming up this week, but we understand y'all going to be gone next week and celebrating that, so we'll celebrate that with you today. That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. Congratulations. If you turn to Psalm 46, we're going to look through Psalm 46 and just read from there. God is in control, because we need to be reminded from time to time that God is in control. Amen on that. God is in control, and let me add, and you're not. And sometimes we want to take control of things that God needs to take control of, and sometimes we don't let God handle what He can handle, and sometimes it is that we find ourselves in situations that we face turmoil and stress and anxiety in our life because we want to take control and need to be reminded God is in control. God is in control of certain situations, and from Psalm 46, let me read the first three verses. This is divided into, it's great for a preacher because it's divided into 3 points. And if you look at Psalm 46, if you read the first three verses, and then after the third verse, there's a word there, S-E-L-A-H, Selah. And it's pronounced different ways, but it is really unknown what that word means, although most commentaries will say that it is an interlude or maybe a silence during that time. But there are 3 times this word is used, and so we'll use each one as a different point here for our illustrations in preaching. The first one comes in the first 3 verses. Now listen to this. As you think God is in control, and so we go to the next slide. First of all, God is in control of situations in the midst of natural disasters. Now think about that when we read the first 3 verses. Think of natural disasters. And I just typed in natural disasters there on the computer and came up with so many. And in December 26, in 2004, there was a tsunami which was in the Indian Ocean. And it was very significant because there was an earthquake in the midst of the Indian Ocean which caused waves as high as 50 feet to hit 11 different countries. The waves traveled as far as 3,000 miles to hit the coast of Africa. And those waves, now they were not 50 feet when they hit the coast of Africa, but they did cause destruction there in Africa also. But it was significant at this time in 2004 that there was no warning whatsoever that tsunami was coming. They do now have some warning systems set up in the Indian Ocean, but it hit Thailand and India by complete surprise. Waves 50 feet high. All of a sudden, you just saw waves coming. People out on the beach. People just enjoying lives. Waves hit, destroy lives, property. Millions of people were homeless. It said 227,000 died because of this. It's just an earthquake happens in the middle of the ocean and causes waves to come toward inland. And you think about that disaster and how it affected those who lost lives, millions lost their homes during that. And you think about that disaster. You think of September 7th, and then 12 days later, September 19th, 2 earthquakes hit in Mexico, just 12 days apart. One was 8.2 magnitude and then followed up by 7.1 magnitude. 2 significant earthquakes there in Mexico, causing damage and people losing lives just a few months ago. And people are still trying to recover from that. And God is in control in the midst of natural disasters. Now let me think. When you think about, we have natural disasters. We have the hurricanes coming. The ones that hit Houston and the ones that hit Puerto Rico. Devastating. It is significant. We saw flooding in Houston like they had never seen before. In fact, if you look in your bulletins, you see a thank you note from the church that we helped down there near Houston. And it was there. They had flood waters in their church building up near the pews, covering the pews there, the lower parts where you sit. And this is where Jeff and Anita Norwood's son and daughter-in-law go, and so we knew them, and that was our tie while we helped that particular congregation, and they needed it. And they wrote a thank you note, and it's in the bulletin there. You can read that. But you know, they'll never forget that little congregation here in Texarkana that helped them in time of need. But that it happens. There's flooding that happens. There's hurricanes that happen. There are tornadoes that happen. You know, we have the northeast part of Texas through Oklahoma and Kansas. It's called Tornado Alley. This is where the cold weather from the north comes in and meets the warm weather from the south, and it forms tornadoes. And it happens, and we have tornadoes that devastate in that area. Tornado Alley, it happens every year, and that comes through there. We'll have natural disasters. It is that things like this happen. Now, in thinking about this, when you're thinking about the tornadoes, the hurricanes, the earthquakes and such, listen to what we read here. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth be removed, though mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. And then we have the word Selah. Natural disasters happen. In Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, if you would turn there and read that, and keep your marker on Psalm 46, we're going to come back to it, but just flip over to Isaiah 45, verse 7. God said, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace. And if you're reading from the King James Version, it says, and create evil. Now, if you're reading from another version, you don't have the word evil there. But you have the word calamity or trouble. You see, it is that God set in place that air from the north, which is cold, and air from the south, which is warm, will meet together somewhere. It's just colder up north and it's warmer down south. And when they meet, tornadoes form. Down in Mexico, the Earth's crust, there are 2 slates, and they shift. Each one of these, it will happen. They will have earthquakes. As these two slates of the Earth's crust continue to merge together and form one upon another, they will have earthquakes there. It's just a natural happening of nature. If you live over in California and they have the San Andreas Fault, and the cities that are built along that fault line will have earthquakes sometime. Don't know when it's going to be. But if you're living there on that fault, at some time, it's going to shift. It's just happenings of nature. Down in New Orleans, you build a city which is below sea level, and you set up the levees to keep the ocean out of the city. But what happens whenever the water comes over and the levees break and you have flooding and because you built a city below sea level? And you wonder, where is God in the midst of all this trouble? Why is it that God has these happenings where 227,000 people die in a tsunami? Or maybe it's just 40 or 50. Every life is important. Every life is significant. And people will look and say, where are you, God? And God is where He's always been. There are natural disasters that happen. It will continue to happen. God doesn't make it happen. He set laws of nature in force. And they will continue, the earth will continue to shift. Cold air will continue to happen and merge with warm air, and things like this happen. But God is still in control, and God cares for us. And so we say God is in control in the midst of natural disasters. And then let's read verses 4 and following. God is in control in the midst of times of turmoil. And I just generally, times of turmoil. You think about turmoil in your life. Sometimes it happens. It just happens. Wasn't anyone's fault in particular. One of the times of turmoil with just things, disease or sickness happening in the 14th century. There's the bubonic plague. It happened and it killed over 50 million people in the countries of Asia, Africa, Europe. Terrible, terrible sickness. We haven't faced anything like it since the 14th century. But maybe we have faced heart disease in your family or cancer in your family. Like I said earlier, every life is important. It doesn't have to be 50 million people to where people wonder, God, where are you? Why did you let this happen? Whether it's 50 million people or whether it's one person in your family. Disease happens here on earth. Turmoil happens here on this earth. Sometimes it is that it's man-made, whether it's actively or passively. Actively man-made turmoil, we think of World War II and Hitler and all that's involved in that, and 6 million Jews losing their lives because of that, and it's a terrible thing. But that was man-made. That they actively pursued this, and turmoil and all that happened in their lives. Sometimes it's just passive. Maybe it is that it's circumstantial. Through it raining or whatever, the roads are slick and someone has a car wreck. Through no fault of maybe this family is traveling alone and this other car just hits a slick spot and crashes head on with this other one. Really, no one was at fault? Everyone obeying the laws? It just happens. And members of this family may say, God, why did you let this happen? Where were you? God is in control in the midst of times of turmoil. Let's look at verses 4 through 7. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, and the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, and shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. Now this is where the turmoil comes. Look at verse 6. It said, the heathen raged, and the kingdoms were moved. And he uttered his voice, and the earth melted. Well, I think of the heathen rage and the kingdoms moved. That's where I went to World War II and with Hitler and such, and actively causing turmoil in lives. We can think about the Las Vegas shootings just happened just a few days ago. That there was someone actively causing turmoil in the lives of it, and people are saying, God, where were you? Why did you let this happen? And people are actively asking that and saying, well, why do things like this happen? There's turmoil that we face in life. Sometimes it's active, like with the shootings, that was on purpose, carried out with a mission. Sometimes it's a car accident, no one's at fault, but we face turmoil. Sometimes it's disease, cancer, heart disease, or whatever that we face, that we have turmoil in this world. Our bodies were not made to live forever. Something's going to happen with us that we face in life. We will die from some disease, some accident, something. It faces in life. But God is in control in the midst of times of turmoil. We know many families facing turmoil in their life. We may ask, well, God, where are you? Why does this happen? God is in control in the midst of times of turmoil. And he said in end of verse 7, Selah. And then he comes to verse 8 through the rest of the chapter. And so he tells us this. God is in control in the midst of disasters. God is in control in the midst of turmoil. So he finishes this psalm saying, turn to God. Look at verses 8 through 11. Come and behold the works of the Lord, what desolation he has made in the earth. He makes wars to cease unto the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in sunder. He burns the chariot in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. He's saying, be still and know that I am God. In the midst of turmoil, in the midst of disaster, when your lives are turned upside down, whether it is one which affects millions of people or whether it affects just individually, you, families, and such. He said, be still and know that I am God. There is a God. There is a God who cares. There is a God you can turn to. There is a God in the midst of times of trouble. Whenever we go and we say, God, where were you? Where are you? He's in the same place he was whenever he created man, and he put Adam and Eve in the midst of the garden. And if you read Genesis chapter 3, it says that there appeared the serpent unto Eve. The serpent was more subtle than any beast in the field. And he came and he tempted Adam and Eve. And they partook of the fruit. And they were cast out of the Garden of Eden. And God was there. But God gave them a choice of what to do. Do I follow the commandments of God, or do I listen to the devil and partake of this fruit which God told me not to eat of? And don't you know God was there watching his children, facing the decision. Facing that decision, what do we do? Do we partake or not? And they did. And we wonder, where's God? Don't you know God was looking down? Don't you know it broke his heart when they rebelled against him. Took of that fruit. God was in the same place he was whenever Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve's children, fought with one another. When Cain said to Abel, "Come out into the field with me," and Cain slew his brother Abel. Don't you know when he came back home and Adam and Eve were saying, "Well, where's your brother Abel?" You know, God asked that question to Cain. "Where's your brother?" And Cain said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Don't you know Adam and Eve had that same question for Cain when he came back? "Well, where's Abel?" Can you imagine the grief and the heartache of Adam and Eve whenever they find out that one son slew another son? And could it be that they would say to God, "God, where were you? Why did you let this happen?" The heartache that one action brings to another family, mom and dad. And we may cry out, "God, where were you?" And we could go throughout the Bible, example after example. We could look at the book of Job, and we know the happenings of Job, that Job, through no fault of his own, had disaster and calamity one after another happened to him and his family. He lost everything, as we would say. He lost everything but his faith. And he would say, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." There are certain events that happen because this world is temporary. This is not paradise here on earth. There's disease, there's death, there's heartache, there are troubles. It's affected you. But God is in control. And God would look down upon us. And let me just read just a couple of verses. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation," did you see? In every situation, by prayer, petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God. And the world does not understand how you can have peace in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of when your life is turned upside down. They cannot understand how you can have peace. Turn your life to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, shall guard your hearts and minds in Jesus Christ. Again, he said in Psalm 55, verse 22, he says, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." We think back with Job, he was not one who would say, as Job's wife would come to him and say, "Well, just curse God and die." And Job would not do it. Could not do it. 1 Peter 5:7 says, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." And so when we face times of turmoil and trouble, heartache and disasters, there is a God. Cast your anxiety on him. Again, and we see in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 6. So we say with confidence, "The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? The Lord is my helper." And he wants to be your helper, and he wants to be there with you. And he will strengthen you, and he will help you. Isaiah 41, verse 10, "So do not fear, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you. I will uphold you on my right hand." I will. You see the promises there. And so whenever we face times such as the Las Vegas shootings or 9/11 in 2001, where over 3,000 or almost 3,000 lost their lives with the Twin Towers, the airplane crashes and such. And when things like that happen, and when we turn and say, where do we turn? God says, turn to me. The last slide just says, life hurts. And it does. If you have not been hurt in this life, you just haven't lived long enough, because it will happen. Life hurts, but God heals. Amen on that. And so whenever we face times, we know that God does not just reach down His hand and stop a bullet from reaching another person. You know, that was deliberate. How many times have accidents happened that not long ago we read about two boys playing with the gun in the house, and the brother shot a brother and killed him? Did not mean to. They did accidentally. Gun went off accidentally, but it happened. God does not reach down and stop the bullet and pull it up. Things happen. There are laws of nature that happen, laws of incident that happen. This is what we deal with here upon this earth. It's temporary, but it is hurtful in our lives. Oh, I want to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven where there's no more pain. Revelation would say, no more sorrow, no more tears, no more death. For the former things are passed away. But until that time, we do have sorrow, and we do have pain, and we do have tears, and we do have death. And how do we deal with it? We turn to God. Be still and know that I am God. I will strengthen you. I will uphold you. I will help you, He says. And so we offer the invitation. If this has helped you in some way, maybe privately, you said, God, I need to turn my life more over to you. I'm trying to handle things on my own, and in my life it's just upside down and in turmoil, and I can't handle it by myself. I need to cast all my cares upon you. Or maybe it is publicly. You need to say, I need prayers. I'm facing difficult times. And I've prayed to God, but maybe you ask for prayers of the congregation, and we're glad to pray with you and for you and to help you and strengthen you, because we're all family going to heaven together. If we can help you in any way, won't you come right now while we stand and while we sing?